Okay. All right. Volumes seems to be okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's episode is a unique idea. And so it's titled, of course, having certain religious ideology, angelic beings. Man has all, like the moment man could see built a house, he wondered about other rooms of existence. The moment the human species could acknowledge an edge, its imagination got work to do. I found a very interesting idea that I wanted to share. And the idea is that, in some sense, the concept of an angel, honestly, I don't remember who the quote was ascribed to, but pretty much some person had said the difference between the concept of the human being and the concept of angels in regards to a sort of creator context is that man can oppose God's will, but the angelic archetype cannot. Do you see? So it's as if angels are heavenly and pure in the sense that their will is the divine will. Therefore, it's kind of strange that we even find in our cultures that when a person becomes really loving and compassionate and gentle or something, they suddenly appear to a chaotic environment as angelic. Do you know? As if like there is something, as if their phone has less programs open, therefore less complexity, criticizing its own self. I find that human life begins with simplicity. And children all around the world, their eyes open up to the world through simplistic ways. And as they get introduced to it, the way it appears to me, it seems as if like it's like layers and layers of ideological representation of self occur moment to moment as the creature lives consciously. And just the notion of an angel not being an angel before its wings find it, what that means, a moment. I don't know what it is, guys. I'm trying to I saw a parallel. I saw a parallel in the relationship of, for example, the archetype of an angel that doesn't have wings suddenly gets wings. Do you know? And then I saw a parallel in regards to like a fruit on a tree growing at its right time. It's in some manner, it's as if nature requires to show you the green light before you drive, and in another manner, you have to kind of drive. There is no green light. Do you know? So I'm kind of looking at the psychology of the human being, and all these esoteric practices. Spirituality is going towards non-duality. That's it. You can write a sentence and get an eraser and start erasing it and just see remnants of like the outline of what you wrote with a pencil on a piece of paper, even though the lead has been kind of erased. You see that outline is like the soul. I constantly feel it's like there is a sort of relationship with the free will that when it's really ready, or even before the concept of ready there, when it's time, certain things happen. You know, you see a seed planted in the soil, it turns into a tree. You see a human being come into existence, and even though it may feel it is clueless, even though it may feel whatever, but eventually it will see that there is a sort of natural development, as if all the trees in the all the plants in the garden are allowed existence, yet to different capabilities of their own. When I'm using the angelic metaphor here, guys, I should have probably said this earlier. Consider two views. One, Aristotle says it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. So, in some sense, just listen at least to what I'm saying. Don't think of its validity. I mean, every person's eyes opens up the world differently. But in some sense, I'm saying be playful with the metaphors that I'm using. At the same time, I am not in any way attempting to be disrespectful to the religions. I am simply wondering what the value of a sort of image is in the mind of the species. And to be honest, this angelic metaphor, I find it to be very, very profound. You know, it's a sort of redemption. What it is as if something in the psyche has been, I think, due to the nature of consciousness becoming fragmented, it feels it failed itself. There's certain failures that, yes, you fail others, the consequences are evident. But sometimes when you fail yourself, you don't realize it until many moments after, where you notice you have changed, for example, you know, or you have become someone else. Some people say ignorance is bliss. It's as if, like, as much as in life, things go to occur on a low level, it's as if as long as there is a consideration of up, there is no telling how long one can exist in an inferior state. You see, there is class distinctions. We cannot kind of ignore the societies of this world and the ideologies, tourist experience of human living. What it is at max, what is it? The lifespan is 100 years. I'm still considering a reality where technology has not made us immortal yet, but that is definitely a possibility. Okay, excuse the interruptions, guys, but I will continue. Um, the wings that found the angel, the responsibility that arose from the freedom, the discipline that comes from the freedom. I thought to myself, okay, let's consider greatness. Shakespeare has this quote where he says, some people are born great, some people achieve greatness, and some people have greatness thrust upon them. And I wondered about the nature of greatness, and I'm like, okay, one thing they all three have in common is that they all three of them have greatness. And then I wondered about what is the greatness of not just one man, but what the civil, but the but the civilization. I wondered that there is some sort of, it may be very transparent, it may be not fully established yet globally, but we do acknowledge ourselves at least as the member of one species. We doesn't mean we get along perfectly as 8 billion creatures on a rock, but we have a sort of ability to do so. We at least know that many people's psychology is dualistically oriented. That means as long as there's desires and fears, it's as if Maya exists. There was once a warrior in battle that was fearless, just ridiculously fearless. And after the battle, as they're victorious, a person who saw this warrior in the battlefield goes up to this battlefield and says, do you not have any fear when you're in battle?" And that warrior who was undefeated and fearless says, "What is fear? I've never heard that word." And there, as if the problem subjectively did not even exist as a design. That is how ability becomes instantaneous. Not because the person didn't know, but in a sense, because the person uh, saw it differently. I wondered what the purpose of the greatest, greatest, greatest to the power of whatever amount of greatness you want greatness is. I wondered about the ultimate greatness. And you know what I realized? I realized, let's assume we were all great. What would we do then? It would just be the continuity of whatever program there is. So, do you see, whatever story the civilization tells itself, it's a ship on an ocean of time and space. The Dalai Lama preaches compassion. Gandhi preaches compassion. The religions preach compassion. Secular moralism preaches compassion. The ancients preached compassion. And I wondered why. Why is love such a big deal? Because only in a space of trust can the true human intelligence be active. As long as there is instability and, in some sense, volatility in the civilization, what that means is, imagine like if some person comes in angry and two people start physically fighting in the coffee shop. Now all these geniuses suddenly become quiet, silently just watching the event taking place, two people fighting. And for a second, it's as if genius has halted. due to the instability of the external realm, due to the inability of the civilization to at least look at the human being and be like, wow, this creature is here once. Does it not want to serve its collective? Is it really too hard to imagine that nature doesn't have a sort of collective pattern? Why is it that bees have a sort of monarchy? I'm not saying like we should all have like a sort of go back to the monarchy days, but I'm saying like there is a sort of natural abidance by the collective effort. So a group of cells become a tissue and biologically. So similarly, a group of human beings become a like a kind of collective being. Do you see? Become a collective movement of humanity. That means it's very easy to kind of think that most people think of it this way: 8 billion separate minds. Technology is going to advance. We're going to connect all these 8 billion minds, so we're going to have some like next level one mind. Okay, that is one path, one parallel reality accessible. But the thing is, like, I was going somewhere deeper with this. Uh, there are moments in life where I consider the mind cries for itself. This is okay. This is. Let me say it like this. I have experienced moments where I have noticed that my attention can simply do nothing, and as it is, reality appears. Do you see? The mind is not like, even though I use the metaphor of writing, but like the mind is not a pen. Do you see? The mind is the world changer. What that means is the context. That means as if, like, when the person feels they don't deserve, as if they don't have the wings to fly beyond that problem. But when the person feels they can deserve, or they do deserve, or why did they never deserve, as these questions ponder in their mind, suddenly it's as my dreams, a strange sort of flight. And it's not to do with wings, it has to do with simply as if, imagine, instead of you flying with wings, it's as if, imagine there was an invisible kind of roller coaster line, as if what can maneuver through space is not just based on I don't know, it goes into a realm of invisible geometry. And geometry is something that, at least in the way I walk and the way my eyes have opened to the world, geometry is uh, a sort of a divine purification of the intellect. Geometry is after we evolve beyond language right now, still the whole civilization is at least um, many people worship language, and they can confront very little language. That means just like how a person may get intimidated in front of a crowd of 1 million people, do you know? So it's like, similarly, the person does not want to engage. It's so many people in life, uh, sometimes it's as if like they want to block reality, not realizing that you cannot tell the earth which way to turn. Do you know how much of metaphysics was just the dude, how much of mysticism was in some sense the dude just being like, okay, regardless of what I think or believe, this is nature. This is how it's happening. I am not just the embodiment of one body in a moment. I am the moment where all phenomena projects in. You know, you become the light of your own shadow, not just the shadow of a true being. You know, so many people have a relationship with themselves. They're like, yo, I have a higher self, you know? And I'm like, trust me, the moment you have a higher self, you have a lower self. The moment you see hell, that's when heaven is there. You know, heaven and hell are they are pairs. They are sold together. The issue is based on how the person tells the story, at least the karma has momentum. Think of it this way, that sometimes in life you cannot choose what happens to you, oh, inevitably, but you can choose at what speed and pace you move. And if you take the human psychology as just, let's say, the concept of velocity, that means if they tell you what a human being is, it's like what the consciousness of a human being is. It's only when it has a sort of movement and direction. Do you see? Why are people concerned about heaven and hell? Because it's a direction. Why do so many people move towards ideologies of other worlds? Because in some sense they are trying to escape what is perhaps meaningless. I call it every human being in their subconscious is reacting to emptiness. You know what that means? That means, like, even me, as I'm saying, giving all these talks, there's a sense of me that's okay. I'm here right now. It's 2020. I'm an existential being, experiencing the whole thing. But at the same time, while I'm here, I also can just close my eyes and in that pitch black abyss of my mind realize that it can also be this. So every time I close my eyes, it's as if I revalue my sight. Every time I open my eyes, that's when, like, I revalue what I did not see. You see, a wise man learns from what he doesn't know as much as he learns from what he does. A smart man just learns, what he knows. He just advances a sort of machine, not a machine, but like a pattern. It's like sometimes the intellect can just become a gladiator arena, and that becomes also distant from the true scope of academia. To not just know, but to rediscover relationships that the creature can have with the cosmos. What that means is, imagine right now, in this current moment you're existing, imagine whatever problem there is. Now imagine that as there is a version of you right now existing listening to my talk, there could be many. That means, just like in chess you can move a bunch of pieces, similarly the psychology of the self can have various intentions, various ways to move. When I was younger, I think children don't do this anymore, but, like, I used to climb trees. Me and my brother we used to climb trees, and we would go up there and kind of sit, and it would be an achievement, right? And there was something about before climbing up or while your hand, it's like there was no plan. As you go up you grab onto the first branch, then your left hand is thinking of, okay, what's the other one? Various potentials being considered. Eventually, it's like action, 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 then new reality emerges. Action, 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 new reality emerges. Now, it doesn't matter whether that action was perfect or imperfect. It's about endurance on some level. Really, what is consciousness? It is a sort of command to continue, as if we are exiled into endless continuity as a part of the cosmos. Even the poet Rumi speaks about a sort of evolution of his attention, as if his consciousness existed. Of course, I'm saying the word consciousness. Consciousness is like an x. Think of it as unknown x variable in mathematical equation. It's just an unknown value, phenomenological value. Now, excuse me, to continue, and I became an animal. I died as an animal and I was man. Science agrees to this point of the poem. Perhaps. Now, after that, he says, why should I fear death? When was I less by dying? I shall die once more as man, to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on to that which no mind has ever conceived. What that means is divinity is the inconceivable. And any moment in your life that comes close to the representation of that animation arising, as if the phenomena is rooted in the inconceivable, the label divine can be given. Rumi, this poet from 700 years ago, this Sufi dervish, he saw his attention being piloted through the mineral kingdom and various levels of existential phenomena. It's as if we are a scanner and we're scanning various dimensions of phenomenology, you know? I think the mind, if it had wings, those wings would be its vision. And based on how the vision moves and how much chaos and order are stabilized, a balance with the symmetrical opposites of reality. I think in a yin yang symbol kind of universe, angels would have one wing white, one wing black. You know? Imagine left wing black, right wing white, and then left eye white and right eye black. Like imagine that kind of character. I'm just trying to imagine, like, I'm looking at the wallpaper, guys. That's why. But really, evolution of thought, the evolution of attention, various ways that human beings throughout history have storified the universe. You can say human beings were like attention that arose and picked up whatever was around it to kind of make sense of the cosmos, only to figure out that it is first of all too big to measure. At the same time, what if it's too big to measure, what should the measurements pay attention to? And so you see, eventually human beings are left with their creative and emotional realities. Creativity without emotion is weird. That means it's like robotic creativity. It would be randomity. You see, it's like any action can be considered random unless there's a stable point of consideration. That means, I'll give you an example. For example, there was a time where I was very, um, this is like years ago. I don't, this is like, what is this, like 8 years ago, maybe? 8 years ago, I remember I was celebrating one night with friends, and I remember I drank too much. And as I was kind of stumbling to go, in some sense, to go wherever I was going, in some sense, I remember I found it a challenge to be like that level of intoxication, but to find at least a way that I can, as if there's no difference. And so, in regards to the way I walk, And what it was that I began looking at my environment and began measuring distance. And strangely, there came immediately an orientation with the space. So I'm telling you, we are creatures of attention. Your attention is your livelihood. If your attention is on something that's inefficient, trust me, your whole being will know. If your attention is on something efficient, on some sense, you will know. It's as if like there's a sort of instantaneous feedback. Don't take your sensory perception lightly. Think of it as an evolutionary process that took billions of years to be at least at this to this capacity, right? It's very easy to look down on things. It is very easy to break things. It is very easy. It's much easier to break something than build it. It may take so many years so many centuries of progress and evolution before we can create like something very incredible, right? But that incredible thing can be instantly destroyed. You see, destroying doesn't take responsibility, but creation does. And so we, in order to be creative, and that's really what the free will is, that means like, it's like they asked this director, imagine, I'm just like animating a playful story here. Imagine they ask a director, it's like, how do you look for actors? And the person says there's actually 8 billion actors in this world. Everybody is acting every day. Everybody is performing. There is a dynamic living going on that in every moment of it there is revalue, like a sort of uh, like a cup, like water in a cup, and somebody's running with the glass of like water, and the water is kind of like the person's trying to balance the water from hitting the brim, like as they're running, you know. We're all actors. It's just that only when we believe we are only in one world, that's when the concept of the actor, the concept of a temporal, like we know we are temporary beings. However, we don't have a temporary relationship with our psychology. Some people feel judged from what they did years and years ago. Do you see? There was something in Zen I found strange. Imagine me kind of raised till the age of 7, like my youth. My background's Iranian, and but I came to Canada and I've been living in Canada for a while. And I remember kind of it was very funny. Like I was reading about Zen. I remember I went to this bookstore and just picked a bunch of random Tibetan Buddhism books. And I remember I opened this book and I got introduced to it, and there was a point in it that it was so shocking for me that it made my whole cultural conditioning feel like it had lost the fight, as if like there was something in this Tibetan Buddhist book I remember reading where it was an idea on emptiness, that when you look at an object, you can look at an object and it has a certain meaning, but somebody else can look at that object and it has a meaning for them too. So what does that mean? That means the object doesn't have meaning by nature. The object is empty. It is our attention that imbues it with value. And when you get acquainted with the subtlety and incredibleness of your attention, your mind roars like a lion, like legit, like you hear a lion's roar, like that kind of. Imagine an enlightened guy opening his eyes, like Buddha opening his eyes, and in front of his face there's a lion roaring, and he's like, "Okay, this is definitely a sign. I'm like something's happened." For me, I find that in our attention to our subjective realm, to the language threshold, simply to the life that is being created. After a person has achieved discipline in an inferior realm, and the only reason they know they're in an inferior realm is because they're still aiming higher. So as long as you're aiming higher, guess what? You're looking from down to up, from down to up. That means as long as the psychology of man has the shackles of guilt, it in some sense does not have a sort of, it's as if the soul can't breathe. And the soul is actually the free will's internal freedom. And it's more about an experiential realization. Like that's the, like, you know, that's the value of yoga. That's why I'm kind of like talking about it. Simply because those ancient cultures understood that it wasn't just about the architecture of thought. It just wasn't about, hey, we will endlessly create databases of knowledge, yay. Like, it's not, it's not about just us creating shapes endlessly. They realized the experiential component meant that you had to have the strength to look at your life. Did you hear what I said? You need to, as a being, have the strength to, for one moment, just be like, okay, world, this is how you're happening. Good for you. And just close your eyes and just wonder. And true wonder is a hollow, like literally that moment where the ship is about to move at hyper speed or something. Vision. It is where the freedom of the world arises from. The most important thing is, what is the point of all your sensory perception? If I asked you, why do you have five senses, if you truly were a materialist, you would be, because it's like a look at the pure materialist, and imagine like generations of after pure materialism, then there comes this grandson of like some generations that's like, yo, if there's a materialist, what if there's an immaterialist? And there, countercultural reverse engineering. I don't know how to say it. At some point, the eyes will move in ways we have never seen before, and only in the tolerance and ability. Like it's how do I say it? They say patience is a virtue. Oh my God, guys! I will tell you, patience is what it is it's a virtue, because the more patient you are, it's as if the more the ripples of the pond are settling before every decision. I see the wings of the angel as connections to the divine will. I see the archetype of the angel as a, a suggestion of the crystallization of human decency in the subjective realms. You know, some may ask, okay, Mr. Within, you're talking about a subjective realm. So if it's a realm, what does it look like? Right? If the subjective realm, how can we, like, when we look at the objective realm, we all see the same mountain, for example, or we look at the same sun. But when we, in regards to the subjective realm, what do we look at? And this is where I'm saying it's evocational. So you see, there are certain moments of life completely entangled in storylines, but there are certain moments in life where there is no entanglement. It's like a child before learning language, or an old man who has lived through the linguistic simulation to a point where he's like, world, I have seen you. Now it is time for me to see what's behind my eyes. And with the last breath, eternity moves again. Psychology is fascinating, but I find that it has no vision. A lot of things in life have no vision, guys. I am telling you, go to the downtown of wherever you live and just look at the stores and ask yourself, if we were truly an advanced civilization, is was that are these the stores, are these the ideas that you want to see? Civilization has been shackled into an economical enslavement where it's occupied its whole life to be a cog in a machine, where it's like, the person lives his whole life, then they're like, okay, what was my life? And it's like, okay, sure, you got the pension, but what was your life? And so I see it has to do with opportunities, at least, and resources, at least for existential individual creatures. So that means, because we have to maintain our biological existence, and that means we require at least an enough of a relationship with the environment to survive. It's kind of strange. It's as if there's incredible amounts of poverty in the world, but in certain countries we're thinking about, okay, how to get rid of stress and creating spas where there's no stress, for example. What I'm saying is the values are completely separated, fragmented into various stories. Really, what it is the human being is a character in a story, you know? And I'm just saying there isn't that great overall story. In one of my dreams, I died. And in that dream, of course, in that dream state, I experienced death. And then I woke up and I was shocked, and I'm like, my mind killed itself when I was asleep. That means I notice that when the body is inactive, the mind lives a life subjectively. But when the body is active, that subjective life becomes simultaneous with the objective life. And so the objective life takes mainly more ownership of it. And the subjective life has no choice but to pay attention to its hunger. So the thing is, we have to entertain a story and do some just as in birth. Birth is easy, you know. Not a lot of people have an opinion on their birth. So birth is easy, you're unconscious, but death, you are conscious. Okay, so in birth it's like from unconsciousness consciousness arises, but in death consciousness is returning to the unconscious, right? And for the human being, it is in you don't touch nature, at least. I respect that law. What I mean by that is, certain components of reality, of course, they are subjectively valued and synced with the objective phenomena. So what that means is, like, I'm not telling people stop living your life. Like, as you live your life, it's just like, what can change the concept or the context? And Mr. Within is saying the concept and the context are both in your attention. That means when you realize your attention is lighting up the world, creativity is the ultimate. The wings that found the angel, the vision that found the mind. In a world where your free will is your control, then there comes an ability to see that everything you have ever known can be revalued. That's the power of the free will in the subjective realms. That's why I'm saying it's evocational. The thought changes quicker. Thought is living in like thoughts come and go much quicker. If man's mind is some sort of hotel, you know. Attention is intersecting with subjective phenomena and objective phenomena as the whole moment. Strangely, it's like we are the space that our body exists in because our body needs space to exist in. Sorry, guys, I'm just looking for something. Um, some sought miracles only to find that if you can't see it in an instant, you can never see it. The simultaneity of the objective realm and the subjective realm, and how there's a momentary witness to it, that's in an instant. If you can't see it in an instant, you'll never be there. Some nights I found myself just looking out the window and just thinking like, am I just pure attention hovering in existence? And I realized that the questions that make you go beyond the surface of reality, there are questions that their value, like there's an opportunity cost to everything that a person does. And if they go beyond the surface of what they have lived in as a normal pattern for a while, they will never be able to see the normal pattern. If a person goes through an incredibly extreme experience, they will never be the same. It's not that they aren't the same. It's just that there a new event has arose in the platform of their conscious mind that they have to attend to. So, in some sense, the relationship of the body with the mind is that the mind is just some mysterious, uh, like imagination is in the air, but in the air of a different dimension. You know, I think flight in general, angelic or scientific, has to consider elevation management, which means transformation. That means, like the pilot, like think about it, the pilot is piloting from one airport to another, and during that whole navigation, it's like one mind of human, like one mind is administering the whole plane of existence of all those people on the plane. Ideas come and go, to be honest. Man is not a machine. Uh, but there is an ability for him to not only behave mechanically, but just like patterns can dictate a person's life, as if the feathers on the angel's wings are each patterns of existence that it has to abide by. You know, it's like we human beings are not just responsible for our objective existence now, but we are also responsible for our subjective existence. If the person has a sort of need for a savior of their own mind, then there comes this idea where the person hasn't even understood personhood. That personhood is really not about. I was also thinking, guys, kind of like the word angel and the kind of mathematical term of angle. They're kind of like the same lettering, just the E and the L have been changed. Maybe the French were up to it. But I'm saying, like, as if in the Abrahamic context there were many archangels, that means there were many angles to the ultimate. I think the human psychology is just oscillating between being individual and being collective. That means because the human psychology is attaining value. Like, how do you know you're a person? Because you're separate from others. Do you know? So the mind is ascribed a sort of unique factor. Every person is their unique self. We have like children having posters of who they want to be when they grow up, which is, I find, that's idol worship, literally. You know. The mind is so advanced and so powerful that a subjective life can also take your attention away from the objective reality. Do you know? That means, like, it's all about just attention. And it's fascinating because the mind, it's like the human being doesn't have wings, but the mind can go places, you know? There's a story of this imperial warrior. This imperial warrior is undefeated in battle, and he's ruthless. He's undefeated in battle, this imperial warrior. Incredibly, his ego is like the most powerful ego in the land. And so, one day, as he finishes, let's say, his 70th undefeated war, like he becomes victorious, as he's walking and as he's sheathing his blade, for a second he just wonders, wait a minute, where are all these people going? And so for a second he wonders, where am I going? And so he's wondering about the afterlife. Like he's this very, but like powerhouse kind of equivalent to like billionaires nowadays, like kind of mindset, and then wondering, what is this afterlife, right? He tells one of his assistants, go find me the wisest person in the land. I have the question of all questions. And the assistant comes back and he's like, all right, there's this sage up that mountain. And somehow the next day, the Imperial swordsman is there. Do you know? He makes it. He's walking up this mountain above clouds, this incredibly beautiful place, and he has his kind of Imperial warfare gear. You know, which like shiny armor back in the day was equivalent to like how in bling is a huge part in hip hop culture. You know, and so, anyways, this imperial kind of warrior, undefeated warrior, he just marches into this monastery, and the Zen master is there, kind of drinking tea with his like disciples or whatever. And so, excuse me, this imperial warrior walks in like a juggernaut, like one of those robots in the Transformer movies, you know, like like his footsteps are that heavy. And so he goes and he walks in there and he doesn't even care if the sage is drinking tea or not. And he's like, Sage, tell me now, what is heaven and hell? And that question, guys, is like, can you imagine somebody on the street just coming up to you, you know, and being like, tell me, what is heaven and hell? And so the sage takes a sip from his tea. And he looks at this warrior and he says, you're too much of a goon. You're too much of a violent kind of like animal for me to tell you. The warrior gets incredibly insulted. Can you imagine being a warrior undefeated in 70 battles for all the years of your life, you being respected, and suddenly going up and this guy drinking tea telling you you're too much of an animal for me to answer you? It's like incredible disrespect. And it's as if with his eyesight, with his eyes, with just the stare in his eyes, as if he looks at the thing and saying as if like, how dare you insult this glory? And he takes his sword out and he's about to kill the sage. And the sage, taking another sip from his tea, he says, in the rage of that warrior about to kind of with the blade, like, inches away from the sage's head, the sage looks at him and he says, this is hell. This is the door to hell. And before the blade hits the sage's head, the sage is just there, just instant kind of present. The sage is just like untouched, you know? His mind's untouched. And in that instant, the warrior can't kill him. His hand stops. His hand stops because his mind's processing. And his mind suddenly realizes, oh my God, hell is a state of mind. It's a sort of hidden intention of attitude. It's some sort of indecent approach. Do you see? So it's a state of mind. It's a state of like blind rage. You know you're internally blind when you're angry. What I mean by that is that means you don't see outside of your own eyes, outside of your own inner eyes. Looks at the sage and with incredible silence, as if he has forgotten about the incredible value of his armor, and he just bows. When he bows, like the disciples are all teary eyed, like this is the most next level thing we've ever seen happen in this monster. you know? And the moment the warrior bows, and that dropping the sword was a metaphor for him of dropping the ideological belief system that certain states of mind in the past had produced, states of the mind had produced in the past. That moment where this imperial warrior can see beyond himself and he bows, that's when the sage says, this is the door to heaven. And the disciples are just like blown away, like literally, like feet away. An explosion of cognitive realization. They're all like, dazed. But what the idea is, guys, really, I'm being humorous here, but really, the intention is that to discover that your states of mind are generating the value to your moment. And at our core, really, what kind of creatures we are not creatures of language. This is a statement that my mind is roaring to the world. We are not creatures of language. There's more. We're not just stories hovering in the void. There's more. But what that more entails does not mean it can be contained in language. It just means at least we can know that we're not just creatures of thought. We're not just subjective moments of things. Like, do you know what that means? That means it's kind of strange, guys. Like, how can we treat ourselves as thoughts? You know? It's all, every day the person wakes up, it's like, how do you even consider it a new day? So, what I consider philosophy in all levels of branches of knowledge to be just various intensities of at looking at phenomenology. Really, all of life is it's a landscape of occurrence, and sometimes your mind, as it is exposed through the senses, your as your sensory perception is like the world for you. Your sensory perception, there is a wonder to kind of consider how it's being processed. Like it's kind of easy. Like a child may come and ask, like the parent, like, "Hey, how does this TV work?" You know, and and the father's gonna be like, "Son, I am so disappointed. Do you not know how to use Google?" We have to also consider, guys, that are we ready to confront our limitations? Any being who's not ready to fail can never succeed. Because failure is nature. Many things fail in nature. And a person's evolution and survival nowadays is not just their objective existence. People are wondering why the prime moving attention that's subjectified is here. I feel it's like what's going to happen for the first time is this global revolution of the alleys of knowledge. That means there's going to occur, kind of, let me tell you what it is. It's the counter cultural reaction to how the poets had failed. Right now in 2020, it's a very strange time, I find, because it's as if before 2020, it's kind of like Terence McKenna once said, "The poets have failed us." He said this to a group in an art school. He gave his lecture in an art school. He was talking to artists. And he said, "The poets have failed us." And what he meant is that greater ethos, that greater collective narrative has not arose. And the species is lingering in inferior games. You only know it's inferior because you also know there is something better. Now, we got to ask ourselves that what is motivating behavior, and it is how every individual human being is having a value. Okay, and their values arise from the individual creature's relationship with its ecosystem. I mean, this is like incredibly common sense, right? We're a creature in an environment, so this creature that's in an environment, as it moves around in this environment, various thoughts arise. So think of it this way: as you wake up, you're this mind, and as your mind moves in various moments, various thoughts are evoked. Now, what this means that when a person communicates, it's actually sequence image kind of maneuvers. I don't know how to say it. It's like really what speech is slowly dropping words into a still pond, or sometimes dropping them very quickly. I don't know. Like the person can have different approaches where how internal subjectivity is vocalized externally. there's something very fascinating I see about this picture here. This wallpaper I've chosen. So, guys, check this out. The person's psychology, this angel, random angel guy waiting at the bus stop, he doesn't see the light is shining from behind him, but his mind is in the shadows, but behind him, his wings are illuminated. And that's an incredible. I don't know who drew this, but like certain people are incredibly talented because really this picture is a global cultural reflection of an emotion. That means it's like before they had to just deal with external problems. Now psychology, the mind of the person, the how a person is animate as a human being on the surface of the earth, it has become so complicated, not complicated, but sophisticated. You know, so something that's sophisticated doesn't mean it has to be complicated. But I'm just saying it's like there has been evolution and it's a fragmentation of psyche. So our ancestors cared less about their emotions because life was tougher. Because life has become easier, we have become more sensitive to our minds. Now, in becoming sensitive to our minds, we feel we have gone astray from our ancestors, but we realize we have also accessed a plane of conception they could not. So it's like there comes a sort of paradox in regards to a short-term analysis of the civilizations movement and a long-term analysis of the civilizations movement. Whenever you think long-term, you give yourself freedom. Whenever you think you have lots of time, you postpone. Not realizing that in that moment you're just projecting an ideal. It's so easy to, just like how easy it is to put on clothing, it's as easy to ideologically evoke. This angel guy doesn't realize my kind of title is above his head. I'm just saying that it's kind of like this person doesn't realize that he can turn around and see the light. And we have to realize this in our psychology. And this is why Carl Jung put such an emphasis in speaking about the anima and the animus. And this is a very, like, when I thought about it, I'm like, Carl Jung is really diving into the dismantling of identity politics in general. Like, he's dabbling with, like, on a atomically subjective. Like, we got to create a concept equal to an atom for the subjective realm. So I would say, I mean, of course, some people say a meme is like the simplest idea you can get, but I think we have to find a word that's similar to atomic. So, um, thoughtomic? No, no, it doesn't feel right. An atom of the subjective realm. What? How would we enter? Sorry, guys, I'm just entertain me for a second. I think I got it. Maybe like we call it atomic and self-tomic. I mean, pretty much I'm just saying like subjectivity can represent objectivity. I can visualize totally like this cup in front of me, like a total exact copy of it, but that visualization is in my subjective realm. So it's like, what I'm trying to say is like, once you become aware of intelligence, you also become aware of how it's moving. Really, a lot of knowledge has to do with it, how alert you are to realize what is living, what is alive in the moment. Pretty much that's life, right? It's like there's something more active which draws the attention. The body hungers for food, the mind hungers for the evolution and advancement of experience and vision. There is a story. There's these two monks, after like their meal midday, they're taking these wooden kind of dinnerware they're given, and they're washing it. And as they go by the river, actually, before washing it, one of these monks, like their friends, and one of these friends suddenly notices there's a scorpion that has taken a wrong turn and is being pushed by the river into being pulled into the river, and he immediately goes to scoop up the scorpion, and the scorpion stings him. And his friend is like, whoa, did this guy just get stung by a scorpion? Like, that's like, okay. And they're both like silent and incredibly peaceful state of mind. And the friend just smiles, you know? And he goes on to, now the scorpion is kind of stuck in the bowl. Now he goes to kind of release the bowl or something, and the scorpion somehow comes and stings him. And in that moment, what's his name? The friend looks at him and says, "My friend, why do you keep saving the scorpion when you know its nature is to sting?" And there's a big pause. And really, what the friend's asking is, you see that creature is limited to that level. Why help it? You do know? That means, think about this as, there's one view that's judgment and wrath. What's the opposite of it? The ultimate kind of helping wrath. It's like a wrath of helpfulness, you know? So he says, "My friend, why do you keep saving?" I think love is an incredible word, but there is a word that surpasses that that has not been discovered yet. Do you know? An ideal. And I think it has to do with just the innocence of the freedom of phenomena. Handling your subjective realms becomes incredibly entertaining when you become aware of it. Okay, because actually how the subjective realm is moving, it's like, in one view, you're kind of like not, you're entertaining thought, you're noticing thoughts come and go, right? So you become incredibly observant. Now, as you observe thoughts come and go, you realize certain thoughts are becoming your actions, and you're acting in certain moments as certain thoughts are navigating. So you could be in a moment where many things, disturbing things happen, but you can suddenly become aware that the disturbance is separate from the observer, and then the observer re-navigates. Sometimes in this life, like, I've had incredible aim and reflexes that I notice the only reason I'm having is because there is an acknowledgement of the space already. I find that the human brain is so incredibly advanced that it is actually trying to recreate the world that's outside. And because it's trying to recreate the world that it's outside, it's analyzing the whole system subconsciously. So subconsciously, you can say we're like, whoa, we're in the middle of nowhere as creatures. What do we do? And then, and then really there comes this sort of counter view response where emptiness becomes the platform of innovation. A civilization fascinated by the designs from the inner realms of human beings. So imagine a global tribe arises, and like back in the day, a person from the tribe would go and find berries, and the tribe had no idea what berries were. And the guy would bring back berries and be like, whoa, we just discovered berries. That guy in the book of the tribe was known as the berry man. The guy who found the berries, who brought the berries to the tribe, you know? So similarly now in 2020, we are all, I consider the era of also the era of the global limits. That means, yes, I do understand there is something cool about capitalism and the ability to have many things accessible and freedom. But I also understand that if all, like in one view, yes, nations separated, but if in one view all the nations became united, do you see there would never be war? The only reason there is war is because the nations are not united. And so nations will be like, yo, we can't unite instantly. But that means, sure, in one dimension, you cannot. In one dimension, nations and cultures have to be preserved in the unique kind of artwork of their destined design so far, right? Like we can't change the past that is past, but we can kind of at the same time say, all right, in one reality, yes, imagine like the scientific theory of parallel realities. Okay, so now imagine in one parallel reality separate nations, in one reality one nation, because if it was totally like one global community, then there can't be any declaration of war because it's like it's fighting itself and it's meaningless. So it just becomes about the whole world attempting to heal the certain nation. And honestly, it has to do with resource recalibration. And really, human beings are not meant to robotically rule. Like, I don't know how dictators have the energy to be dictators. That's fascinating to me. You know? You know, dictators in history are like, how? How did they have like such a, how much like fiber did they have in their diet? Like, what is this? It, the resolution of freedom, it's kind of like a cycle. Certain phases of life, freedom is more valuable than discipline. Certain phases of life, discipline is more valuable than freedom. Eventually a sort of realization of a multi-leveled mastery at work because you have been learning in some I call it experience tunneling. Every day tunneling through a sort of design and outlook on the world, closing your eyes and waking up the next day and retunneling. Do you see? That means based on how you live, it's like this is why they say the way you live in the present moment will suggest like how your future is. This is why sages back in the day could suddenly tell a person in that moment what their whole kind of karmic timeline was. You see? The wings that found the angel. What would be an example of that? The inventor strays away from the status quo only to realize what the status quo truly means. The inventor is judged, called a fool, shaken by those closest to him, but still a sort of can lantern light in the midnight kind of flickers in the mind of this inventor. This inventor goes on many failures, so many failures. It's like, okay, I didn't even know there were that many failures possible. And then the inventor suddenly finds one moment where it's as if the mind has deserved its effort. And then the invention arises. Now, when the invention arises, there is a totally re-updating of the ability of man. The more successful moments a human being experiences, the more they will feel they deserve to exist. Do you see? The more their stories and efforts has been accepted by, the cosmic landscape. Michelangelo says, "I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free." The unworthy saw the worth and they set it free. The unknown saw the known and set it free. The value of the moment realized that the witness is really the value giver. So it's like, in some sense, the painter is not the paint. And simply the introduction to one's mind is like the same bewilderment. Imagine like you're a nature photographer and suddenly this kind of like snow leopard or whatever comes, this kind of like mountain lion, snow mountain lion just like appears. So just like how you'd be like, whoa, an exotic creature with an exotic mind, like what's this creature gonna do? The same way you actually have a mind. That means as a human being, it's like there's many ways to kind of study the moment, but at least it begins with trying to find a sort of effort to govern intelligence. Um, And you can say self-worth arises from the image of the self, and the image of the self is actually in a relationship of self-awareness, where in certain moments awareness is being the self, and in certain moments the self is being the awareness. That means sometimes the moment is animate in a way where the environment is moving, the external reality is moving more than the internal reality. In dream states, your internal reality is moving because the external reality is quiet, like the pond settle. And I totally believe in this idea that there is a speed to thought and how language arises in the attention of man. It's kind of like this, guys. It's like there's a spotlight, a shape comes into the spotlight, okay? Now, as this shape comes into the spotlight, there's an awareness of like an opportunity for, like, how do I say it? It's like eyes are seeing eyes that are seeing eyes. So what it becomes is it becomes a multi-leveled site, and that's when you realize, oh my god, my psychology was multi-leveled. Or you see that it's like, of course everybody has a different, there everybody has, you can say, a fresh pair of eyes, to be honest, you know But I'm just saying, I'm just suggesting that we gotta kind of like land the new. And what grander task is it? Where people's exploration of their subjective realm has a value to the civilization. That means it's like what Albert Einstein, a lot of people care for his equations, but when he said imagination is the sign of true intelligence, people were like, okay, okay, Einstein, maybe you've had a few drinks. But Einstein was saying the most incredible thing, that we can use the data from our imagination. And people didn't realize it. They banished the imagination. They exiled it, and it became due to its deviation from some sort of norm value of the status quo. So that imagination has to do with a personal relationship with the world and the mind that is being the world in the moment. And also, of course, the opposite can also arise. And There's the story, guys, that this person is running on the side of a river trying to find a bridge. It's a Zen story. And he's running and he's running. It's like, oh my God, how long has it been that I've been running? And he's running. And he suddenly sees this old, kind of like enlightened, like Zen master, you know, just meditating. The guy's like this really old Zen master. And he says, hey, Zen master, he's like, hey, wise sage, old sage or something. How do I get to the other side of the bridge? Sorry, how do I get to the other side of the river? It's like, where's the bridge? And the wise old sage, kind of from his meditation, just moves his eyebrows as if they're a curtain. And he looks at the guy and he's like, you are on the other side of the bridge. And there's a pause. And of course, that's the end of the Zen story. That means what the guy was looking like. Of course, it's silly on one dimension, but on another dimension, you are what you're looking for. That means it's like your lack of ability to take responsibility for your intelligence is the problem, not just that the world is a problem. You know, I'll share one last story where pretty much it's like I could say it really quickly. It's a bunch of grandkids prank their grandfather. They put a piece of cheese on the grandfather's nose. The grandfather wakes up, freaks out, goes to every room of the house. He's like, "Oh my God, it smells here! It smells here!" He's freaking out. He leaves and he goes outside the house and he's like, "Oh, okay, there should be no smell." And he suddenly realizes the smell's there and he's like, "Oh my God, the world stinks." That means one tiny inefficiency had made his vision of the collective suddenly become uh, misvalued. Do you see? And so there's also a sort of requirement to cultivate an ability to constantly look for the efficient vision of every moment. That means, think of it this way, just like how we say bad things can happen in a moment and good things can happen in a moment, let's forget that let's just acknowledge that ideal, but just say it like efficient phenomena can happen and inefficient. That means in the moment, in any sort of moment, there is an same amount of freedom to access a bad idea as much as there is to access a good idea. So now, in regards to efficiency and inefficiency, if you realize efficiency is actually easier than inefficiency, your life becomes incredibly efficient. Anything that you value as simple, you're more open to. Anything you value as more complex, your mind is like distant away. Is further from. Find a freedom that was here before you were. That's the best kind of freedom, I think. Yeah. And I gotta totally thank the audience, guys. Usually, when I give these talks, I kind of go with the flow of the moment, you know. And there's always the challenge of the heart of the being tested in every action they do. So ultimately, knowledge is a mirror to the unknown. The unknown is looking, knowledge is a mirror for the unknown. And I think that's kind of, for now in 2020, one of those uh, really high up uh, metaphors that's really the archetypal foundation of civilization story so far. As the angel found his wings, you can say, the wings found the angel, rather than the person found the truth found the person. The ultimate acceptance came, the presence beyond the personality, the ultimate value giver to reality. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste.